I am Ryan Wormeli here, stepping in for Joey P. Thank you so much for the kind birthday wishes from Joe. I don't appreciate Erickson throwing me under the bus, letting everybody know that I am 32. I feel very washed up now. I was telling my friends over the weekend that, when you're like 30 and 31, it's like, okay, I'm like barely in my 30s. Now it's like, I'm just in my 30s. So Fitz, let me start this off by apologizing for all of the old jokes I've made for you over the years.
Very nice. Yeah, at 32, you have pretty much hit the age cliff, Worm, but it's great to be able to do a show with you on your birthday and great to do my first Fantasy Pro show with Terrell. Very excited.
Yes, Terrell. We had our first show last week, and we talked about how excited we were to do the fest here as well. I didn't realize it was your guys' first two shows together. Of course, we have, as everybody can see, Pat Fizmaurice, Terrell Furman here. Terrell, very new to the company here, so we wanted to get you on the fest and get you started off here on the right foot with our big 5-hour live stream. We only gave you one segment, I think, so it's not too overwhelming, I hope.
Yeah, one segment I already messed up by not sending in my players with enough time. So sorry to the production team in the back that you got to deal with me with no graphics. But we're good. We're gonna have a great time. It's gonna be great.
We're a team of pros here. That's why they call us the Fantasy Pros. So somehow we'll figure out a way to make do here. But no, thank you again to Joe and to everybody at Fantasy Pros for the birthday wishes. This is of the 3 Fantasy Fests I've been involved in, this is the second one that has been on my birthday. So you know what? It's just that time of year. I should get used to a year out going forward. We've only got 30 minutes with the 3 of us here together.
We should schedule every single one for Worm's birthday.
Just
for the rest of the time.
What are we doing fest this year? It's whenever August 19th. That's what we're doing.
Hijack his birthday.
Yes, exactly. I'm hoping we don't do that. Let's jump in. You guys just heard the bounce back wide receiver segment with Joe Erickson and Jamie Eisenberg. Thank you to Jamie for joining for that and for all the guests who have been on in the first 2 hours already. We are talking bounce back running backs. As a quick reminder for everyone, all of our 2024 consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. We did get names from Fitz, so we're going to start off with what he provided here. And Fitz, before we jump in, because I think people will kind of notice that some of the names that you provided are guys that are going relatively early in drafts. There's some first round names. There's some second round names. There's guys that are being drafted somewhat aggressively. So when you sat down to kind of come up with your 5 running backs, how did you define bounce back? And was there a certain threshold that they needed to be at last year that you thought made them eligible for this list?
Basically just players we think are going to do better this year than last year. And in some cases, substantially better. And I think that's the case with all of the guys on this list.
I think that's fair. And let's just start off with the number 1, who's one of my favorite running backs this year. It's Bijan Robinson. He's RB2. Among the position, his ADP is RB3. So it's RB2 in the rankings. ADP RB3. So again, this is a first round player. Fitz, depending on how risk averse you are with Christian McCaffrey, this might be one of the first 2 running backs off the board in your leagues. What defines him as a bounce back player for you?
Yeah, he's got to bounce back from Arthur Smith. Worm. It does feel strange to have this abundantly talented running back listed as a bounce back player. But last year he was RB9 and a half point PPR scoring, RB17 in fantasy points per game. Bijan had 41% of the Falcons' rushing attempts last year. And even if you filter out the quarterback runs, he was still under 50%, 47.2% of Atlanta's rushing attempts by non-quarterbacks, which seems kind of suboptimal to have a guy with this level of talent carrying the ball that infrequently. And Arthur Smith is out. Zach Robinson is in as the Falcons' new offensive coordinator. And, we can't guarantee completely optimal play calling, but I think it will be more optimal than Arthur Smith's play calling, which sometimes is just too much of the vanity play calling and being cute and running reverses to Scotty Miller and Kadero Hodge. Like, just give Bijan the darn ball.
Fitz, I know that Breece Hall is not on this list that we're going to be talking about, but we're not allowed legally to talk about Bijan Robinson without comparing him to Breece Hall. It's been one of the more fun debates of the fantasy offseason. So as it stands right now on August 19th, do you have a preference between Breece and Bijan?
Yeah, slight preference for Bijan. One has had major knee surgery in the last 2 years and one hasn't.
That's very reasonable. Terrell, same question here. Do you have a preference between Bijan and Breece, just because that does seem to be one of the kind of skeleton keys to the season in the first round, at least?
Not really, actually. I think they're kind of neck and neck for me. I've actually kind of started to talk myself more into Bijan. I think I was early Brees, but now I'm switching over to Bijan. And it's really a lot of look at where he was lining up. Like he wasn't just in the backfield, he was lining up in the slot. He was first in terms of running backs routes lined up in the slot in the NFL, and he was second in terms of outright. The only person that was ahead of him was Rashad White, and yet all of that, and there's a numerous amount of not wide receiver, but running backs, including Brees Hall, Travis Etienne, Jalen Warren, Rashawn White, Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, who had more receptions than him. And so I think that now with Kirk Cousins slash Michael Penix, it sounds like we might be getting the Matt Flynn, Russell Wilson fiasco that happened way back with the Seahawks going on in Atlanta. But either way, regardless if it's Cousins, regardless if it's Penix, I think that both of those two guys are way more talented than Desmond Ritter and whatever the Falcons were doing at quarterback last year, where they can actually get him the ball and get him those receptions. And that's going to be the thing that pushes him over the top. He's a great runner, and that's just going to make him an RB1 off rip. But to be one of the top, one of the very best, that receptions load increasing is going to really do it for him.
If everything hits for Bijan, there's nothing that he's not providing you. He can give you touchdowns. He can be that goal line back. He can give you a ton of receptions. He has that skill set, and obviously he can be a workhorse. Now we'll see if they do that. They do like Tyler Algier. We know the history with this Rams kind of coaching offense is they like to ride one guy. We saw it with Kyron Williams when he was healthy. We've seen it with Todd Gurley in the past. These guys in the Sean McVay tree like to have that workhorse back. So if it is Bijan, I mean, like this sky is the limit. Like, right? It's you could throw out any cliche you want about the type of year he could have, and I wouldn't say it's too much. Like, there is a very clear world, and again, you could say this too about Brees or a healthy McCaffrey or some of these other guys, but there is a clear path to, you could paint the narrative of a year from now, Bijan is the consensus number one pick in every draft.
Yep.
Like, that is a very reasonable outcome that could happen. And Fitz, the other thing with Bijan that I like, and Terrell started to allude to this, is I like that there's talent on this offense, but there's not overwhelming talent. It's not like the 49ers where you have to feed George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey and Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. I mean, it's a lot of names. Here, it's Kyle Pitts, it's Drake London, and it's Bijan. And that's basically it. So I really like how concentrated it is in this offense between those three. Well, okay. Darnell Mooney, I actually do like, but he's not on the same level.
Don't disrespect Darnell Mooney like that either. He's competing.
Well, what do you think, Fitz? Is Mooney somebody that, you know, could kind of eat into the lineup, or is what I'm saying making sense as far as how concentrated this offense could be?
I mean, it does. It should be a more narrow usage tree than it was last year when there were all these touches for Cordero Patterson and Jonnu Smith or whatever. But Terrell does make a good point with Mooney. He did get a lot of guaranteed money. And by the way, shout out to Terrell for making the Matt Flynn reference. Matt Flynn with the most lucrative regular season finale, I think, in the history of the NFL, parlaying that into a big contract with Seattle and then never actually being the starter when Russell Wilson came along.
It's a great gig if you can get it, honestly.
I would love it. I would love to get paid to be a backup. What? The highest paid backup? Amazing.
Yes. Let's go to another running back that I'm certainly taking in the first round. I know it's not the case for everybody. There are some people out there who don't have Jonathan Taylor, who is a person we're talking about as RB4. He is that for me, and Fitz, I know he's that for you as well. Terrell, where do you have Jonathan Taylor this year?
Oh, I think Jonathan Taylor could finish as one of the top 3 running backs, especially with the deterrent that is now Anthony Richardson. Like, that's really, we know what Jonathan Taylor can do. He's shown us the talent on the ground. We've seen Shane Steichen's offense be able to produce a really, he got Zach Moss another job. Like, at that point, you got a pretty good offense that he gives Zach Moss another job, and people are actually sitting there talking themselves into Zach Moss. And I think Jonathan Taylor is going to come back into this offense playing with Anthony Richardson, and what they're going to be able to do with both of those guys and what they can do on the ground. I think it's going to be really special. So the only thing is the touchdowns. Like, the touchdowns may be the concern, and how much does Anthony Richardson vulture at the goal line. But if he continues to get the touchdowns, he already gets the usage on what he does on the ground. He's going to be big for this offense.
Fitz, obviously, you've been talking about Jonathan Taylor all offseason, not just because you are a Wisconsin Badger. I mean, for me personally, we're going to be talking about running back tiers in the next segment with Billy Muzio. So I don't want to dive too much and kind of spoil that conversation, but I do think he's not in tier 1 for me. I think he's closer to tier 1 than the other guys in tier 2. He is my very clear RB4. And I know, again, others might disagree, but for me, there is nobody outside of those big 3 that I'm taking ahead of him at the position.
Yeah, for sure. And why is he in this bounce back category? Because he missed 7 games last year and 6 games the year before. But if we think back to that 2021 season where he ran for 1,800 yards, had 2,100 yards from scrimmage, and had 20 touchdowns. And now Terrell does make a good point about maybe the touchdown ceiling is a little capped because we know Anthony Richardson is going to run for his fair share of touchdowns if he stays healthy. And I think some people see Anthony Richardson as sort of a deterrent to why they should be interested in Jonathan Taylor. But to me, it's totally the opposite. I'm excited about Jonathan Taylor because of Anthony Richardson. And Worm, we've talked about this all the time since, you're from that area. But thinking back to that Robert Griffin III rookie season when, before injuries derailed his career, he was such a lethal rushing threat for Washington back then. And that season he played with Alfred Morris, who was a 6th round pick, who clocked a 4.67 in the 40-yard dash that year at the combine. And Alfred Morris ran for 1,600 yards and 13 touchdowns that year. And RG3, when they did the RPOs, the run pass options, that opened things up for Alfred Morris incredibly. And Jonathan Taylor is 10 times more talented than Alfred Morris was. I mean, Alfred Morris, decent running back, kind of a ham and egger. Jonathan Taylor is a really special running back. And man, I can't wait to see what this offense is going to look like. But I think we're going to see a big spike in efficiency with Jonathan Taylor's numbers.
Now that I'm, well into my 30s, I have to remember the youths. So in case the RG3 Alfred
deep
Morris
into your 30s
is too, deep pretty much the back 9 of my 30s at this point. So just for those who maybe weren't around for the RG3 Alfred Morris, experience, a more modern version is Lamar and Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards is averaging 5 yards per carry in his career. He is not that type of runner, and I love Gus. He was awesome in Baltimore, and I really had a good time cheering him on for the last several years. But look, you have a guy with that kind of threat like Lamar or like RG3 was, or like we are pretty certain Anthony Richardson will be this year. It just makes it so much easier. Terrell, I'm really curious kind of your approach to running backs with mobile quarterbacks. And I've asked Fitz this a lot over the years. And so, like I said, I'm curious what you think. Do you tend to side more along the lines of guys who, with the mobile running back, they're going to lose out on those touchdowns to the rushing quarterbacks? Or do you tend to side more along the lines of you like that extra efficiency from those guys?
Oh, they're 100%. You're gonna lose out on those touchdowns, and it's the name of the territory. You can't have a Lamar Jackson in your offense and not think that you're gonna miss some attempts, you're gonna miss some touchdowns. But it's what you do with the work that you get, and that's why I'm so into players that are more explosive, very, very explosive, and they do really big things, yards after contact, all of that. Jonathan Taylor profiles is one of those backs that, hey, all right, if your rushing attempts goes down, are we still going to get good, big, explosive plays out of you? Because it's going to open up more. We're going to have people that's going out there and they're going to crash down on the quarterback, and it's going to create a lane for you. And you got to be able to hit that lane hard and be able to explode. So I like running backs, even with the mobile quarterback. I understand the reason for the downgrade, but you just have to look at the talent of the running back. If you have a really, really talented running back, they're going to make do with what they get.
Speaking of guys who have mobile quarterbacks that they're sharing a backfield with, let's go to the next player here. Saquon Barkley, obviously changing teams to the Philadelphia Eagles. He's RB6 in ECR, RB5 in ADP. So Fitz, again, kind of along those lines, similar conversation. He's now in a backfield with Jalen Hurts. Obviously with Barkley, you also have the massive offensive line upgrade coming from the Giants. Is that kind of what played into him being on this list for you?
Yeah, and hopefully he stays healthier. But the offensive line upgrade is massive, going from maybe one of the worst offensive lines in the league with the Giants to one of the best with the Eagles. Even despite the Jason Kelce retirement, I think this Eagles offensive line is surely top 10, if not top 10, not top 5.
And where are you ranking Saquon? Like I mentioned, he's kind of RB6 in consensus and then being drafted as RB5. Is that where you have him as well?
Yeah, I have him RB6. I still don't like him as a first round value, but I think early in the second makes sense.
Okay, I was going to ask about that because I think he's going to go in the second round of almost every draft. So is he more in that first, like kind of the first half of the second round for you, not a back end of the second round type of guy?
Yeah, and I do see him get taken at the tail end of the first round quite a bit, maybe in close to half of the drafts I've done so far, but I do think he's better maybe in the first 4 or 5 picks of the second round.
Terrell, where do you have Saquon ranked this year?
Yeah, I think Saquon is, unfortunately, and I hate to say it, I think that he's right where he's at, probably top end of the second round. I wouldn't be mad if somebody take him at the back end of the first round because I think that unfortunately the talent's going to be there. As a Giants fan, he's really, really good and he has the best offensive line in football. Yes, they're going to shore up the center position and make sure that works, but with Jurgens, they've been, everything has been so stationary on the offensive line, and that's the complete opposite that you could say for the New York Giants. And so I think that Saquon is gonna get the success that DeAndre Swift had and double it because I think that he's gonna be more consistent. I think he's gonna have more of a use in the passing game, and they're gonna try to make sure they get him his touches in the passing game because when he's in open space, he makes some beautiful things happen. So the only thing that I think will go down is the touchdowns, but Saquon has so much usage and so much talent where he can get it on the ground, he can get it through the air and with the receptions where you're probably not even missing the touchdowns, and the touchdowns probably make it a special week when it's already a good week.
Fitz, one of the other kind of angles too, being paired with a mobile quarterback, it's, not just the maybe added efficiency with the more open running lanes. It's not just the touchdowns. It's also the pass catching because a lot of times mobile quarterbacks are very willing to, when the pocket's breaking down, rather than checking down and kind of racking up those receptions for the pass catching running backs, which Saquon can be in terms of his skill set. They will just take off. So are you worried about that in Philadelphia, that from a half PPR or full PPR perspective, that Saquon might take a hit?
I am a little worried about that. Jalen is not really a check down guy. So I think Saquon's pass catching productivity is probably a little capped. And let's be honest, we have not seen him be special as a pass catcher in like 3 or 4 years anyway. That's maybe one of the things we were really excited about with him coming into the league, that he could maybe be another Marshall Faulk who would give us just this phenomenal production, both as a runner and as a pass catcher. We haven't really seen it in the passing game the last few years, but as a runner, I mean, like there is a lot of promise for Saquon Barkley in 2024 with Jalen Hurts helping to open things up with his mobility, with that improved offensive line.
To a degree, Terrell, I kind of just feel like I see some red flags with Saquon, and I'm viewing him as more of a second round player. I'm just kind of preferring the receivers at the back end of the first round and right at the top of the second round. Having said that, like, am I just overthinking it? Is this like, hey, he was one of the most dynamic running back prospects to come into the NFL 6 years ago. He's still only 27, which is older for a running back. It's not like he's into his 30s yet. He's going to a team that has been very successful, that should have a really good offensive line. Like, there should be touchdown opportunities aplenty. So even if a larger percentage of them are going to his quarterback, the overall bucket of touchdowns, there should just be more available in Philly than there were in New York, like significantly more. So am I just overthinking it? Like, should he actually be considered the back end of the first round more so than I'm giving him credit for?
I mean, the only concern that I have is injury. That's it. Like, I think that the talent is there. I think the offense is there. I think everything is predicated. They paid him the money, and it's not like they paid him a little bit amount of money. They went and broke the market for him, and so I think that they're going to use him. They're probably going to check down a little bit more, run design screens behind that big and mobile offensive line. That's going to really, really open things up for Saquon. Like, I think everything is there. It's just, is he going to play the games? Like, that's the only concern I have. And that's probably the only deterrent that has me away from trading him because I have been scorned by early running backs going down early on in the season. I mean, you name it. I had that running back when he said that he wasn't playing in this year, or they just came up through camp and got hurt. Like, it doesn't matter. So I've been scorned. I've been hurt.
But did you have Le'Veon Bell the year that he chose
Yes,
to sit out? Oh,
yes,
brutal.
yes.
Absolutely
He
brutal.
won me my league the year before. So I mean, it was
Yeah.
it's so many different things, but that's it. If you tell me that I'm guaranteed to get Saquon for the full duration of the season, I'd say he's a top 5 running back easy.
Okay. Let's take a quick moment to give everybody a reminder about My Playbook. Once your draft is done, manage your fantasy football lineups and dominate your leagues with My Playbook from Fantasy Pros. My Playbook is a suite of powerful tools to help you make better decisions, manage your lineups, and win your leagues. Created by the Fantasy Pros, the #1 fantasy sports advice and tools provider in the world, this app will let you import your team to get custom fantasy football news, rankings, and analysis. So sync your leagues today at fantasypros.com/myplaybook or download the Fantasy Football My Playbook app. All right, we've got a couple more running backs here that Fitz provided to us with his list. Thank you again, Fitz, for actually following the prompts and giving us these names. Terrell.
Yeah. I'm glad I said something before you did, so it's not as awkward.
Beat me to it. Next running back up is Josh Jacobs. And Fitz, I know this is one that Debro, who will be joining us later on during Fantasy Fest, he was on earlier, he'll be back again later. This is one that he disagrees with. So why are you making the case for Jacobs as a bounce back?
So one thing Debro is hesitant on with Josh Jacobs is that his metrics last year, some of his advanced stats were pretty dismal. He gained 15 or more yards on only 2.1% of his runs. He averaged only 2.29 yards after contact per attempt, which put him near the bottom of the rankings in that category. Had a 45.9% success rate on his runs after being at like 57.4% in 2022. And that's the thing. I mean, Jacobs was terrific in 2022, led the league in rushing, 1,653 yards. Last year, obviously wasn't healthy the entire season, but just the overall efficiency was down. And maybe part of that was that the Raiders played most of the season with a day 3 rookie at quarterback. So Jacobs was seeing a lot of heavy boxes. I think those advanced stats are maybe a little more descriptive than predictive. Because like if you watch Josh Jacobs, he is one of the toughest, best inside runners in the league. And now he goes to this offense that's looking really good with the improved quarterback play from Jordan Love. Last year, Love really turned it on in the second half of the season. They've got all these good young wide receivers, a couple good young tight ends, and a pretty solid offensive line. So I think we're going to see the efficiency back up this year. But the one thing I would caution people about with Josh Jacobs, Matt LaFleur has never really been a one running back kind of guy. He will not pound his running backs the way Sean McVay does. And we've seen this with A.J. Dillon, who I think everyone would agree is a vastly inferior running back to Aaron Jones. Yet even with Aaron Jones healthy, Dillon was getting 10, 11, 12 carries a game on average. And even going back to when LaFleur was the Titans offensive coordinator and had a 24-year-old Derrick Henry, Derrick Henry only got like 50 or 60 more carries that season than Deion Lewis did. So it's not going to be a 300 carry season for Josh Jacobs, but I do think we're going to see the rushing efficiency creep back up after a down year in 2023.
Terrell, Josh Jacobs is RB12 in the expert consensus rankings. He's RB12 in ADP. Is that about the right spot for him?
No, I'm actually out on Josh Jacobs. Once he signed with the Packers, it was a death sentence for him, in my opinion. And it's because, just like Pat said, Matt LaFleur, like free Aaron Jones was a thing around the fantasy community for a long time. They continued to say it. It was a big, big thing. And there was a reason for it. 2019 with Matt LaFleur, 17.8 touches per game. 2020, 17.7. 2021, 14.9. 2022, 16. 2023, 15.6. Like, that's not enough. Josh Jacobs is coming away from a Raiders system that gave him the ball every chance they could. 20.2 in 2019, 20.4, 18.1, 23.1 in 2022, 20.8 last season. Like, he's consistently got the ball. He's worn defenses down, and that's where he's kind of done his work at. But he had a really, really good offensive line to run behind over there in Las Vegas. Not as good here with the Packers. I think they're still trying to figure it out. And right now they're projected towards the bottom of the league in run blocks. So I'm concerned for Josh Jacobs. I just think that the system he's coming from is a lot better, and I don't know if he's going to mesh with it, especially with the hype that it sounds like Marshawn Lynch is getting in practice.
Let's get to the final running back here that you wanted to talk about, Fitz. It's Javonte Williams, ranking in ECR is RB29, ADP RB31. So this is a bit lower down than the other names we've been talking about. I love this pick by you, Fitz. He has been one of my, kind of coming on recently, but he's been one of my favorite targets in drafts. And we've talked about this on the show before. I really like guys who are another year removed from that big injury. He's young enough that, you would think he could bounce back. It just takes time when you have as devastating a knee injury as he had. It sounds and seems like through the early couple of weeks of preseason that he's going to, have a really good hold on this RB1 spot. I really like the idea of Javonte Williams this year. And I think we could be in for not just like, oh, it was a nice bounce back, but like a major bounce back from Javonte.
Yeah, everyone was so smitten with Javonte when he first came into the league and how powerfully he ran and just like the combination of burst and tackle breaking ability. But he was sharing work with Melvin Gordon. And then we were excited. It looked like Javonte was going to get to be the guy and then tears his ACL. Comes back last year, averaged 3.6 yards per carry. Didn't really show us the same sort of powerful running style, the sizzle that we saw from him in his rookie year. But now he's more than a full year removed from that knee surgery. And hopefully we'll see more of what we saw from him when he first broke into the league. And what's really appealing to me, Worm, is the pass catching potential with Javonte, because we know in a Sean Payton offense, running backs are going to get their share of targets. The Broncos led the league last year with 153 running back targets. Javonte had 47 receptions. I think he could approach like 60, 65 this year. Just in the preseason game against Green Bay yesterday, he had a nice little dump off from Bo Nix that he turned into a 15-yard gain and had a 14-yard touchdown catch called back because Bo Nix had crept over the line of scrimmage. So we saw it in just the handful of snaps he played in that preseason game. Like there is a lot of pass catching upside here for Javonte, and hopefully we see more out of him as a runner than we saw last year.
Terrell, do you see a lot of upside here with Javonte also?
Yeah, this is actually a player that I've recently flipped on as early as on air. I flipped on Javonte Williams, and it's just because last year I want to just really scrap last year from the Denver Broncos record books. Like I've never seen a coach, and I've kind of gotten to the point of now I'm assuming Sean Payton was tanking that offense last year. He did not want Russell Wilson there. He didn't care. He did whatever it was to make him look bad. And in a couple of preseason games, he has now shown me that Bo Nix is his guy, and he's going to give him every single opportunity to succeed. Whether Bo Nix does anything with it is going to be up to Bo Nix, but Sean Payton is going to give him every single opportunity. I think that does happen in the past game with short dump offs to Javonte Williams and just allow a player another year off of injury to make plays. If he goes and they're able to nickel and dime this way down the field and they get into a lot of red zone chances that they didn't get last year, he didn't have the opportunity for touchdowns because they weren't in the red zone. Now I think that they might actually be able to get to the red zone enough where he gets those opportunities for touchdowns even more, especially when you have a rookie quarterback and you don't want to put him in harm's way and have him throw on the goal line.
We are up against it on time, but I do want to squeeze in some audience questions that I have not been doing a good job of incorporating into the segment. So let's do some rapid fire here, guys. From Andrew Kell, should I keep Devon Achane or Michael Pittman in my keeper league? Fitz, what do you think?
Achane. I'm an Achane guy. You know,
I knew you were going to say Achane. That was the gimme. Terrell, what do you think about that? Achane or Pittman?
Did he say what round?
He didn't. He just that was.
I'm gonna assume. I'm gonna go with. I think Achane's a low pick. I'm gonna go with Achane, but if he was in a higher round, Pittman.
Achane's the guy who, if you hit on that, you win your league. So I would say Achane. Another one here. Would you take Amon-Ra or JJ full PPR this season? So Justin Jefferson or St. Brown? Terrell, I'll start with you in full PPR.
Justin Jefferson. I still think that they're just gonna hammer him with targets. It's close though.
Yeah, I'm really torn. Like with the QB stuff, Fitz. What do you think?
I have had Jefferson just ahead of Amon-Ra in my rankings. I've thought about flipping them on several. I can't bring myself to do it. I think Jefferson is QB proof, and I don't necessarily think the McCarthy thing damages Jefferson's value at all this season. I think Darnold made DJ Moore go when they were together in Carolina. DJ Moore still had a big season, so I think Jefferson's going to have a big season too.
All right, sold. I'll agree. We'll go with Jefferson. House of Cheese asks Garrett Wilson or Kyron Williams in a keeper league. He does not designate rounds. Fitz, what do you think? I mean, for me, it's Wilson pretty
It's
easily.
clear
Yeah.
cut.
Yeah.
Okay. Terrell, same thing?
Yes. I've been waiting a year for this Garrett Wilson hype. Absolutely.
And I'm like a touch nervous about Kyron, just like the Blake Corum of it all. And he was hurt a bit last year. I know they do really like him as a player, but I'm nervous enough that if you're going to offer me Garrett Wilson instead, assuming this round, there's the keeper value doesn't come into play, I will definitely take him. And then the last one here, just talking about the running backs, is should we be worried about CMC this season? Already has the hamstring injury, of course. So, injuries are always going to be a concern for anybody, really. CMC does have some history with injuries, even if it didn't really creep up as much last year. Terrell, what do you think? Are you worried about CMC this year enough to drop him in rankings?
I think Christian McCaffrey is going to fall off a cliff. The injuries are a lot, man. He's had a lot of carries in the past 2 seasons, and it's already starting now. It's starting small, but if it happens that he misses 2, 3, 4 games, that's not a lot of games missed, but it's still going to hurt in fantasy.